In 1998, Pokemon wasn't just a game anymore, it was a religion. Red and Blue had taken over the world. The games, the anime, the cards, the cereal. Pokemon had become the biggest thing on the planet. And behind it all, the team at Game Freak, they were barely hanging on. The sequel should have been a victory lap. Instead, it nearly destroyed the company that made it. Gold and Silver wasn't just hard to make, those games were nearly impossible. A skeleton crew building the most ambitious Game Boy game ever made on hardware older than some of the kids playing on it, me included. They were rewriting the rules while the entire franchise teetered on the edge. And just when it looked like Pokemon's golden future might collapse, one man came in to save the whole thing. No spotlight, no paycheck, no credit, just code and care. This is a play-by-play of Pokemon Gold and Silver, the sequel that nearly killed Game Freak, Pokemon as a whole, and the man who saved it. You already know the story of Red and Blue. Or at least you think you do. In 1998, Pokemon was everywhere. It wasn't just a hit, it was the biggest media sensation since the Ninja Turtles. Kids didn't talk about it, they breathed it. Anime was #1 on TV. The trading cards were breaking recess. The toys were flooding every store. And the games, Red and Blue, were redefining what handheld gaming could be. In total, over 31 million copies of the first-gen games sold across the world. It became the best-selling RPG of all time, and none of this was supposed to happen. Game Freak didn't start as a game studio. It started as a fanzine, like a fan magazine. Satoshi Tajiri, the man who would one day create Pokemon, was just a kid obsessed with arcade games, especially ones that let you find patterns, crack systems, or chase high scores. He wrote articles about Xevious, Outrun, Mappy, and then he stapled them together with his friend Ken Sugimori, who drew the covers. They were nerds, but they weren't just nerds. They were obsessed with systems, with exploring, with collecting. Sound familiar? It should. That's what the games are. By 1996, Tajiri and Sugimori had pulled together a tiny team and released Pokemon Red and Green in Japan. At first, they flopped.
Where's the Lancers?
Sales were slow, the media ignored it, until Koru Koru magazine revealed a secret, 151st Pokemon called Mew, hidden deep within the cartridge's code. A mythical Pokemon kids weren't supposed to know about, let alone find. But some did, and that mystery turned into a wildfire. Mew made Pokemon feel secret, and that's what turned a decent RPG into an obsession. Nintendo didn't fully understand what they had at first, but they were watching.
I mean, it's alright.
Red and Green crossed the 1 million mark in Japan. Nintendo pushed for localization, and in 1998, Pokemon Red and Blue launched in North America. It was a hit, it was everything. Within months, Pokemon Yellow was announced. An anime adaptation was hitting 3.7 million viewers per episode. A Hollywood movie was greenlit.
My fingers, why are they balls?
And the team who made the games were still cramped into an office above a bike shop in Kanto, Tokyo. Maybe 20 people tops. They were debugging Red and Blue, fixing bugs, translating code, handling fan feedback, balancing movesets. At the same time, they were being asked to build a sequel. Tajiri, the father of Pokemon, was already well burnt out. He'd poured everything into Red and Green. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't managing. He started pulling back. So Junichi Masuda stepped forward. Originally, the game's composer took on a new role, director. He wasn't a CEO, but he was the engine, and he had a problem. Everyone wanted more. Nintendo, fans, the anime writers, toy companies, even the team itself. And not just more Pokemon, they wanted an evolution of the IP. A full new region, over 100 new monsters, new types. Dark and Steel, shout outs to my Umbreon fans out there. A real-time clock that changed the world around you. Pokemon breeding, gender differences, trainer phone calls, held items, reusable elements from the first game, and maybe Kanto itself. That's not a sequel, that's a second game stacked on top of the first. All running on this thing right here. This is my original copy of Pokemon Silver. Crazy. I bought this the day that it came out. This isn't on a Game Boy Advance, not a Nintendo 64. A cartridge the size of, like, I don't know, what does that look like? It's like the size of like a piece of mango, like a half a piece of mango or something. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think that, I don't know. How big is that?
All right. You know what I think those cartridges are the size of? They're about the size of, you remember when you used to get your headshot for the yearbook, like when you were like in 1st or 2nd grade? And eventually they would bring the pictures back to you, like you could order some, your mom would order some, and you could get those ones that were like 2x4 or whatever, like a little portrait size one. Well, the cartridges are about the size of that one, but specifically the one that the girl that you had a crush on gave to you, and you would keep that one in your wallet until you find out that she's kissing another guy
Behind the dumpster after school. My Shayla.
That's what they're the size of. Signing out.
Not the point. What I'm trying to say is, this is all built on hardware released 9 years earlier. And they didn't have time to wait. They didn't have tools to help. There was no Pokemon engine to build on. They were writing this thing from scratch, at the height of the biggest franchise in the world, while being asked to top the biggest game in the world. This wasn't just pressure, it was survival. Game Freak had gone all in on Red and Green. The profits from that success were already being reinvested. If Gold and Silver failed, Game Freak didn't just risk losing fans, they risked losing everything. This wasn't just a sequel, it was a life or death scenario for Pokemon and Game Freak. In early 1999, Pokemon Gold and Silver was a disaster in progress. Game Freak had made promises and big ones, but behind the scenes, the team was collapsing. Half the studio was still fixing Red and Blue, localization bugs, memory issues, battle glitches, that type of thing.
Yeah, come on! Whoever did this, just confess! We promise we won't be mad!
That left a skeleton crew to build the sequel nicknamed Team Gold, and they were already underwater. They weren't just making new content, they were building an entirely new system and full backwards compatibility. It was supposed to be the biggest Game Boy game ever made, but nobody knew how they were going to do it. Masuda was directing a mainline Pokemon game for the first time. He was directing a video game for the first time. This guy's a composer. There was no blueprint. Tajiri had fully stepped back. Sugimori was stretched thin, doing hundreds of new designs. And there was no engine, no pipeline. They were improvising, guessing, trying things that had never been done before on a Game Boy. They were still targeting the original Game Boy hardware, not the Game Boy Color. Why? Because Nintendo hadn't told them otherwise. They had to make the game work in black and white and color. That meant every sprite had to support dual palettes. Every menu needed contrast mode. Every map needed memory-efficient art swaps for night and day cycles. And they only had 1 megabyte to do it. That's smaller than a picture you would take on your phone right now. Systems were breaking. Breeding logic kept corrupting save files. The internal clock desynced if you left your Game Boy off for too long. Nighttime palettes were hogging memory. Time of day system? Great idea. Now make it work on 1989 hardware with no real-time OS. They were trying to bend the Game Boy into something it was never meant to be, and it was fighting back. Even without animated sprites, Gold and Silver looked incredible. Full native Game Boy Color support, unique palettes for every city, revamped sprites for old Pokemon, battle UI updates. There's new towns, environments, and regional variety. For a game that had no extra hardware chip, it was visually stunning. But with every visual improvement, there was a trade-off. Every megabyte mattered. Every color choice risked breaking something else. No roadmap, no time. Masuda was flying blind. There was no experienced project manager, no guide from Nintendo, just raw ambition, fan expectations, and burnout. They started missing milestones, then missing deadlines. Delay after delay piled up. By mid-1999, the game was over a year behind. People started quitting, morales tanked. Then, to top it off, Nintendo started giving the cold shoulder to Game Freak. Nintendo wasn't ignoring Pokemon, but they weren't exactly helping either. Their focus had shifted almost entirely to the N64. 3D graphics, bigger hardware, Ocarina of Time, that game was crazy. The Game Boy was still considered a side hustle. Game Freak's project, a handheld sequel. Everyone else was profiting off of Pokemon, but the people who created it, they were burning out. This wasn't just development hell, it was emotional collapse, something we unfortunately see way too often with dev teams. I mean, you don't have to look too far, there's like Cyberpunk, that game got crazy hosed. You really hope that the team that's making GTA 6 is being treated well. As summer of 1999 rolled in, the dev team hit a wall. They couldn't fit the world of Johto onto the cartridge. Not even Johto. Forget adding new regions, forget Kanto. They were fighting just to make the base game work. They had overpromised, underplanned, and now they were running out of time. There were whispers in the studio that Gold and Silver might get scrapped entirely. They didn't even know if the game would ship. The Pokemon franchise was on top of the world, but the people who built it were at the bottom of a pit. Gold and Silver was about to break. By the summer of '99, Gold and Silver was on the edge of collapse. Johto wasn't fitting, the game was unstable, morale was shot, and the team was preparing for the unthinkable, cutting features, scaling back the vision, canceling Kanto. And that's when he showed up. Not a Game Freak developer, not a Nintendo executive, but a friend, and maybe the most gifted programmer in the entire industry at the time, Satoru Iwata. Iwata was a rising star at HAL Labs, a studio best known for Kirby and Earthbound, but more importantly, he was a fixer, a technical wizard, the kind of guy who didn't just write code, he really understood it and tamed it. He was known for doing the impossible, rebuilding Earthbound's code from scratch in less than a month. compressing game engines so tightly they fit on hardware they were never meant for, something that Nintendo is really known for today. He would optimize games that no one else could ship. And he was friends with the guys at Game Freak, especially Masuda and Tajiri. So when he heard the project was falling apart, he didn't send advice. He pulled up his sleeves and got to helping. Iwata asked for a copy of Red and Green's original code and reverse engineered the entire thing, just so he could understand where things were going wrong. And then he quietly got to work. He found bloated systems, rebuilt inefficient code, streamlined how data was stored, compressed sprite formats, and rewrote core parts of the battle logic without breaking anything, all in his spare time. He wasn't even on the payroll, he just cared about his friends' work. Iwata's optimizations unlocked something the team thought was impossible: space. With his help, they had enough room to add the entire Kanto region. Again, this wasn't the current plan, it had been abandoned entirely. This wasn't in the spec sheet, it was a miracle. They weren't just going to make a new game, they were going to let players revisit the old one inside the sequel.
You serious?
And it would all work. No one had done anything like this before. 2 full regions, 16 badges, 250 Pokemon, 1 cartridge, 1 megabyte.
2 bedrooms, no rugs.
Other studios needed CD-ROMs to add content. Game Freak had Iwata. This wasn't just a technical win, it was a creative rebirth. Game Freak didn't need to scale back. They didn't need to settle. They got to make the game they actually wanted to make, all because one man decided he could help. And when it was done, he didn't brag, he didn't ask for credit, he just went back to Hal, back to his day job, and didn't say a word. Years later, Masuda would say that Gold and Silver was the most stressful development of his entire life, but it was also the most rewarding, because someone believed in them when they themselves didn't. The greatest Pokemon sequel wasn't saved by marketing, or money, or luck, it was saved by one man's mind, and his desire to save his friend's project. On November 21st, 1999, Pokémon Gold and Silver finally launched in Japan. And despite everything, the delays, the scope creep, the near collapse, it was ready. Fans lined up overnight. Stores sold out within hours. It was one of the biggest launches in Game Boy history, honestly, maybe gaming history. 10 months later, on October 15th, 2000, I remember this day quite well, Gold and Silver hit North America, and the hype was unreal. Magazine covers, TV spots, trading card expansions, Pokemon the Movie 2000, tying it directly into the games. Oh my gosh, that movie rips. By now, Pokemon was culture. But the question was, could the game live up to the hype? The answer is duh, obviously, that's why we're talking about it. This game freaking rips. This wasn't a lazy follow-up, it was a leap forward. The world remembered where you had left your mark. And then, after dozens of hours, you beat the game and found out it wasn't over, you were only halfway done. Kanto was back, 8 more gyms, old towns, now changed with time, a second Elite Four. It felt like a sequel and a reunion at the same time. Like you'd grown up, and so had the world around. Gold and Silver didn't just expand the game, they built the template. Breeding became a permanent core system of the Pokemon games. The real-time clock has influenced countless games like Animal Crossing. Crystal introduced animated sprites, setting the stage for enhanced editions. And the idea of post-game content, Gold and Silver basically invented that. From this point on, every new Pokemon game would be measured against Gold and Silver. It became the bar, and honestly, it still is. Gold and Silver made Masuda more than a composer. It made him a director, a producer, a leader. He'd go on to guide Pokemon through multiple generations, becoming one of the most impactful figures in the franchise, maybe even gaming history. In Game Freak, they learned something priceless: creative independence, which at this point, I'm not so sure is for better or worse, because the modern games look like chunder, but that's beside the point. Honestly, we're really hoping to see better stuff in the future. Please get it together, boys. As for Iwata, his role in saving Gold and Silver was just the beginning. Years later, he'd become the president of Nintendo, the first programmer to ever lead the company. He'd revolutionize how the company communicated. He greenlit risky ideas. He'd win fans around the world with humility, kindness, and vision. But back in '99, he was just a friend who showed up when it mattered most. Gold and Silver wasn't supposed to be this good. It wasn't supposed to work at all. It barely made it across the finish line, but somehow it became a masterpiece. 2 regions, 16 badges, 100 new Pokemon, 1 cartridge, and my personal favorite Pokemon game by a country mile. Gold and Silver didn't launch with fanfare about behind-the-scenes miracles. There were no documentaries, no dev interviews, just a game that worked. And for millions of kids, that was enough. No one knew better. What they and myself didn't see was the pressure, the burnout, the depression, or the one guy who quietly saved the whole thing and went back to work like nothing had ever happened. For Junichi Masuda, Gold and Silver changed everything. He didn't just direct a sequel, he became one of the architects of the franchise. And for Satoru Iwata, this was one of the first moments where he did what he'd do best for the rest of his career. Step in, fix it, and never take credit. No big reveal, no announcement. Just a little extra space that changed everything. Today, Gold and Silver is still considered one of the best Pokemon games ever made. Crystal, a little bit above it, but that's, like extra polish. Really, it's just Gold and Silver. It's the reason we expect sequels to push boundaries. It's the reason post-game content exists. It's the reason the bar for Pokemon is set so high. And yet most people don't know just how close it came to all falling apart. Sometimes the best games don't come from a smooth development cycle or unlimited budgets. Sometimes they come from teams barely holding it together, and one guy who shows up at the last minute just to make sure it doesn't fall apart. Not bad for a game that almost didn't fit on one cartridge and is less than 1 megabyte. Anyway, thank you for watching. This is a play-by-play of how Pokemon Gold and Silver came to be and how it almost killed Pokemon as a whole. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. I'd love to see you around for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Musubi on the house.